Murata the Pyro Archon and the God of War versus Il Capitano, the strongest and first Fatui Harbinger. Everything points towards that they are going to fight in Natlan and square off. So let's talk about it. I think most of you, like me, are kind of starved for something like this in Genshin Story because we had Sumeru, we had Fontaine that had great Archon quests, but I'm sick of the trickery, the mind games, just the little twists in the stories. I want to see some meat and potatoes like we had in Inazuma. I think that's why I love that Archon quest so much, because I felt like we were in danger. The Raiden Shogun was dangerous, and she was lethal, and she was threatening. I want to see less talking, and I want to see some people throwing hands. And what better characters to square off than the Captain, the strongest Harbinger, and the Pyro Archon, the literal god of war, that probably competes for the Raiden Shogun in terms of raw power and strength among Archons. And I know you might be thinking, but we know next to nothing about these characters. That is true, but we know enough, and to be honest, we can sort of gauge where they're at, because both of these characters seem to have a similar demeanor, in that they probably want to use their fists, not their words. The Captain, for the most part, is described as very honorable and cunning, righteous, so I don't think he's going to resort to trickery, cheating, or any kind of games. And as for the Pyro Archon, we don't know much about her, but she's the god of war, and she was not killed during the Cataclysm. She's not the original god of war, but we know that she's from the same race as Vanessa from Mondstadt, so she's going to have a lot of grit, tenacity, and she's going to be absolutely powerful in her own right, so it can be assumed that she's at least ballpark to the Raiden Shogun in terms of raw power and strength, and we can actually gauge the Captain's strength as well, based off of what we already know, and the other Harbingers, because the other Harbingers are kind of a tell for how strong the Captain actually is. But in order to actually go over this, let's discuss some of the theories going around there. One of them being that Murata is actually the Sovereign, the Pyro Sovereign, and that the Pyro Sovereign and the Pyro Archon are one and the same. This is a theory floating around, and although it has merit, because, Neuvillette talks about dragons being in Natlan, dragons are a big theme around it, and we don't actually hear about the Pyro Archon, but he talks about the Captain instead, makes everyone believe that Pyro Archon is actually the Dragon Sovereign, which could be true, but I don't think so, because it would have had to have been somewhat recently. The Heavenly Principles has been asleep or hasn't been seen for 500 years, but the Pyro Archon wasn't killed 500 years ago, so the Pyro Archon would have already been existing, so that means that the Pyro Archon would have been fooling the Heavenly Principles for over 500 years, and we know the Heavenly Principles was active before then, so there's no way the Heavenly Principles would have allowed a Dragon Sovereign to control a Gnosis and a region willingly, so I just don't see that having that much merit, but you never know. And as for the Captain, his stereotype, because all Harbingers are based off Italian theater group stereotypes, the stereotype that he's based off of is known as like an embellisher, exaggerator, somewhat like embellishes his strength, so people seem to think that the Captain himself isn't nearly as strong and perfect as everyone seems to think he is, because everyone says that he's basically this perfect god-killing man. So that is a possibility as well, but I don't see people like Dodore, Arlecchino, and Columbina following the Captain, leading the Harbingers, and not seeing through this facade. Plus, we know that they're not fully based off these stereotypes, so those are the two things I had to debunk before going over this, but let's talk about the Captain. How strong is the Captain? Nahida said the top 3 Harbingers are as strong as gods, but that's all she says, so that's up to our interpretation. I'm assuming that they're base Archon level. We've seen Signora clown on Venti, but Venti's not necessarily strong. I don't see them doing that to Zhongli. And then although Signora just finished a fight with us, she got clowned on by the Raiden Shogun. So that kind of gives you a base. Now, Grandmaster Varka is strong in his own right, and he basically says the Captain is just a walking god killer, basically. He says that give him one of Klee's crayons and he'll take out a Ruin Guard without even trying. This is just a really funny way of saying that the Captain is so ridiculously strong that a Ruin Guard doesn't stand an inkling of a chance. We know Tartaglia isn't even close to the Captain, not even in the same league, and yet Tartaglia puts up a good fight against the all-devouring Narwhal, and put up a pretty good fight with us too. Also, the Captain is the #1 Harbinger. So what does that even mean? It's the goddamn Captain. It's in the name. What does that mean? It means that he's in charge of the Harbingers. So everyone below him It's his job to keep them in line, but also to whoop the ass if they decide to betray the Fatui. That means that if the Dore, Colombina, or Arlecchino, or anyone else gets out of line, he's got to come there and turn them into a corpse by any means necessary. So let's look at the Doctor. He's very methodical, conniving, probably one of the smartest people in Teyvat. Colombina we know almost nothing about. Her, she could be, on paper, probably the most powerful of all if she's the Angel of Death or Shade of Death, or if she's some kind of ancient Seelie race type goddess or being. And it's hinted that she has power over emotions from Scaramouche, meaning that possibly she can mess with your head emotions, maybe immobilize you. I think a fight with Colombina isn't going to be physical at all, but much more psychological. So you could even argue that somebody like Nahida or Venti or even Farina that have more wits and intelligence and are mentally strong have a better chance against Colombina than someone like the Raiden Shogun. I think Colombina, if that's her powers, would clown on the Raiden Shogun, being that the Raiden Shogun isn't necessarily the most resolved mentally. She has a lot of PTSD and she suffers. She went and hid and dug her head in the sand when things got tough. I know that's kind of harsh, but it's true. The Captain, in this sense, is meant to be the embodiment and the best of all of them. Every Harbinger, he's the embodiment, he's perfect. He's the perfect human to take on gods. That is his entire purpose, that's his entire persona. So, Murata, I think, is going to have a similar persona, being the god of war. She's going to relish in combat, and her nation's always in a state of conflict and war. I think that's just the way of life there. I don't think it's meant to be a negative thing at all. And let's just be honest with ourselves. We know enough about Murata and the Captain to know that they don't probably want to negotiate, either of them. Not out of disrespect, but they probably don't want to talk. They probably want to prove themselves, earn each other's respect, and scrap it out. The God of War is not going to want to play politics, and neither is Capitano, the ever-righteous Captain. And I know a lot of people, although some people do think the Captain measures up to the stronger Archons like the Raiden Shogun, some people are in doubt, which I can't blame you because we don't really know, and he has no accomplishments yet in-game or anything like that. The Raiden Shogun has thousands of years of battle experience and she's immensely powerful. But the Captain himself, like I talked about, is the embodiment of all the other Harbingers. He's meant to be this perfect being. His entire reputation's built on clowning on gods. Now I know, an Archon's much more than just a god, but that is why he's the #1 guy, so that he can keep all of the Harbingers in place, and he is the literal muscle of the Fatui. In case things go sour, negotiations go sour, and shit doesn't work out, they need that Gnosis either way. So guess who they send? They have to. That's why he's there. And he may not have thousands of years of experience like the Raiden Shogun, but the Raiden Shogun also spent the last 500 years hiding in the plane of Ithymia, whereas the Captain's been just absolutely dusting and clowning on gods left and right. And not one person, even a Shogun puppet, who knows just how powerful his mother is, can say anything negative about him because they know just how much of an absolute threat this man is. So yeah, just to put on the record, I do think the Captain would edge out the Raiden Shogun, being that their strengths are probably pretty ballpark similar, and she might have more battle experience, but the Captain has worked his way up, whereas the Raiden Shogun's always been just this really intense, strong god. The Captain's probably used to being the underdog. He has the mental resolve, intelligence, and cunning methodical thinking as like someone like the Dore. Look who he spends his time with. He's surrounded by other powerful individuals from all across Teyvat that all have unique strengths, and he's the embodiment of all of them. He's the leader. So he's probably gonna have enough resolve, intelligence, and cunningness to defeat someone like the Dore if he steps out of line, have the willpower, emotional check, and mental strength to deal with Colombina, enough foresight and critical thinking to deal with someone like Arlecchino, and this goes on because he has to be able to deal with all the Harbingers. So people vastly underestimate the Captain, in my opinion. Now as for the Pyro Archon, it's literally impossible to say just how powerful she is, other than, like I said, suggesting that she's ballpark with the Raiden Shogun, but she's probably even more of a threatening opponent because, you know, she's the god of war, so she's probably been fighting this whole time, getting stronger. She probably loves those strong opponents, being that she's a Muratan, like Vanessa. They love to fight, prove themselves. Vanessa was a champion gladiator in Mondstadt, just thrown into the pits, never lost once, and defeated a dragon. But Murata is the Pyro Archon version of that, so it's going to be a very close and tough bout between these two. I would even say this goes down to the wire, but ultimately the Captain will win. Now you're saying, oh, how can you say that? You're saying that the Pyro Archon could be equally as strong as the Electro Archon, and yet the captain will win? How? Well, it's simple, really. Because the narrative of this whole game is that the Harbingers get the Gnosis. And if the Pyro Archon is honorable like the captain, and they square off 1v1, making him earn that Gnosis, well, the Fatui always get what they want, right? In that sense, Capitano has some plot armor because the Fatui always get the Gnosis that literally drives this entire game's story forward. So if they square off, which everything kind of points towards that, we got the Nation of War, the Pyro Archon, the God of War, Il Capitano, the righteous man that he is, both of these top gladiator combatants. Do you really see them sitting down for a cup of tea and wanting to talk about the Gnosis? No. They're warriors, and they're going to have warrior pride. They're going to want to earn each other's respect, and the captain will want to earn that Gnosis 1v1 fair and square. And like I predicted, probably Dodore working on resurrecting the third descender, whoever that is, somewhere else in Natlan. And we might even get a handful of Harbingers in Natlan. It's going to be an intense story quest. It has to be. We got resurrection. We got all of the Gnosis going to be in one place, where at least we're getting the last Gnosis from the Pyro Archon. This is the most important Gnosis we're ever going to collect. And what better way than having your number one strongest Harbinger face off against arguably, debatably, the strongest Archon. Man versus God. If you're seeing this Hoyoverse, you literally have the power to just do something so simple, implement this into the story, and make everyone happy. Because if we just get more behind the scenes political nonsense, which don't get me wrong, that can be interesting storytelling too, but not with the God of War. You can't have politics with the God of War. Come on, let's have a war, let's have a battle, let's have fighting. I want to see some fireworks, kind of like we did in Inazuma, where the Raiden Shogun, she doesn't like to discuss shit, she just likes to hack people in half with her boob sword. I want to see some epic battles between these two, come on. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed the video. You might not agree with me, maybe this doesn't happen the way I'm exactly saying it, but I do think the captain is going to win this fight if it happens, because, well, obviously it drives the plot forward, but everything that we've heard about him is building him up to be this unbeatable, perfect human, the peak of humanity, the pride of humanity for that matter. That is the captain in one word. And if you think it's a little bit of an exaggeration to say he can beat an Archon, well, hopefully, for better or worse, we'll find out in Natlan and not have him just gallivanting behind the scenes collecting the Gnosis. That would be boring. I'd be pissed. So again, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope you all are having a great holiday. And as always, we'll see you on the next one. Later.